My ex-wife, Vanessa, left me with our kids and a note that simply said, "I'll be back in a few years." 6 years later, she returned to find out that I had already divorced her. Vanessa and I had been married for over 14 years. We met in high school and quickly tied the knot, never having much time to explore the world. But honestly, I thought that was okay because we had each other. We even had 2 children together. However, Vanessa always wanted more, a bigger, better life, and she never hesitated to make that clear. She spent almost all our savings on unnecessary luxuries, expensive clothes for our kids, or the latest Chanel handbag for herself to impress the other moms. At first, I thought it was cute, but it quickly spiraled out of control. I could barely pay the rent on time. I asked her repeatedly to stop, but it seemed she just couldn't. One night, I woke up to find a letter on the bed. In it, she told me that I was holding her back from living the life she dreamed of, and that she had found someone who could help her explore the world in the way she always wanted. The letter ended with the words, "I'll be back in a few years, and we can pick up where we left off." I was stunned, angry, and heartbroken. I called her nonstop, even having our kids try to reach out to her, but every call went straight to voicemail. I had to break the news to our young children that Mommy would be gone for a while. They were so confused, asking me if she had died. I didn't even know how to answer, but to me, it felt like she had died. The months that followed were rough. But as I adjusted to life as a single father, I started feeling a strange sense of relief. I no longer had someone constantly asking for money to buy things that drained all our savings. I wasn't living with a wife who withheld affection unless I bought her gold earrings at the mall. My kids, though devastated, began adjusting to the situation too. As time passed, I realized that without Vanessa, life became simpler, quieter, and much more peaceful. I had more time for myself and finally managed to get financially stable. A year after she left, I realized I could no longer stay married to her. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. Since Vanessa was missing, the divorce was granted automatically. I sold our house and found a charming cabin in a small town I had always dreamed of living in. One Vanessa had said was too rustic. By then, I felt like I was living in a constant state of happiness. I no longer felt suffocated by complaints or the pressure of always trying to please someone who could never be pleased. I began to truly love myself for the first time. Life had become so much more peaceful without her. 3 years after she left, my kids no longer even mentioned her name. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch of my cabin, I heard footsteps on the trail leading to my front door. My heart tightened when I saw her silhouette, Vanessa. She was wearing the same confident smile she always had when she wanted something, mixed with a tinge of regret. She hadn't changed at all, still wearing expensive clothes, still flaunting flashy accessories. It was as if she hadn't learned a thing during her time away. I knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted to pick up the life she had abandoned. But this time, I wasn't having it. "Vanessa," I said coldly, my voice steady. "What are you doing here?" She paused for dramatic effect, clearly expecting me to embrace her or at least show some emotion. When I didn't, she said, "I said I'd come back, and here I am. We can pick up right where we left off, like I wrote in the letter." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but instead, I looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You think you can just disappear for 6 years, leave everything behind, and come back like nothing happened?" Vanessa seemed taken aback by my reaction. She had clearly expected a triumphant return, not this confrontation. But I wasn't going to make things easy for her. "I know I made mistakes," she started, her voice softening, "but I needed to find myself. Now that I'm back, we can be a family again." Just then, my oldest son, Lucas, stepped out of the cabin. At 12, he was far more mature than his years should have allowed. When he saw Vanessa, he froze. She smiled, outstretched her arms, and said, "Lucas, my boy, look how much you've grown." Lucas took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice thick with resentment. Vanessa, oblivious to the pain her absence had caused, tried to approach him, but Lucas backed away again. "You can't just come back and pretend nothing happened," he shouted, before running back inside the cabin. I felt a pang of brokenness seeing the pain in his eyes, but I also felt a surge of anger, not at Lucas, but at Vanessa for thinking she could just waltz back into our lives and force a reconciliation as if she had the right to do so. "Vanessa, go," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "We've moved on. You're not part of this family anymore." She stared at me in disbelief, as though I were the ungrateful one. "What do you mean? I'm the mother of your children. I have the right to be here." Her words made me snap. "You lost any right to be here when you left your kids crying for you every night, while I was the one picking up the pieces of our broken family. You don't get to come back and act like nothing happened. You gave up that right the moment you walked out the door." Vanessa's face hardened, but I didn't care. This was over. It had been over for a long time. I stood there, staring at Vanessa as she tried to justify her actions, a mixture of anger and disbelief boiling within me. "You abandoned us," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "and I'm not going to let you do it again." Vanessa, always quick to defend herself, opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off before she could say another word. "Oh, and just so you know, I divorced you 5 years ago. Legally, you're a stranger to us now." Her face drained of color as my words hit her like a slap. It was as if the reality of the situation finally sank in. The control she once had over our lives was gone, and she had no idea how to regain it. But of course, she wasn't one to back down without a fight. "You sold our house," she said indignantly, eyes flashing with outrage. "Where's the money?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Typical of her to care more about material things than the people she had abandoned. "The money?" I repeated, my voice cold. "It went into raising our kids and building a new life. There's nothing left for you, if that's what you're thinking." Vanessa's anger only grew, her face contorting into a mask of fury. "That's not fair," she shouted. "I sacrificed everything for this family, and this is how you repay me." The irony of her words hit me like a physical blow. Sacrifice? She left us behind without a second thought to chase her own selfish dreams. And now she had the nerve to talk about sacrifice? Sacrifice? I repeated, barely able to keep my composure. "You abandoned everything for your own selfish desires, and then had the audacity to think you could just come back like nothing happened. Don't talk to me about sacrifice, Vanessa." As I spoke, Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking more grown up than ever at 12 years old, his eyes full of silent judgment. Behind him, Clara, now 9, peeked around his shoulder, her face a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Dad, is she leaving?" Clara asked, her voice small, almost afraid to know the answer. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied without hesitation, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Vanessa turned toward Clara, a hopeful smile on her face, but it was instantly clear that her daughter wasn't having any of it. Clara's gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding her mother's eyes, a silent rejection that hit Vanessa harder than anything I could have said. Vanessa's confident facade cracked, and she started to sob, but I felt no pity. This was a consequence of her actions, and she had to face it. Vanessa wiped her tears and took one last, desperate step toward us. "Please," she pleaded, her voice shaking, but I was resolute. "Vanessa, leave. And don't come back," I said firmly. For a moment, she hesitated, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. Slowly, she turned and began walking back down the trail. This time, she didn't look back. I felt an overwhelming weight lift off my shoulders as I watched her disappear into the trees. I looked at my kids, standing beside me, and made a silent promise. I would never let anyone hurt them like that again. We deserve peace, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The months that followed were quiet, The calm I had longed for finally settling in. Life was slowly taking shape again. Lucas and Clara were adjusting well to our new routine, and I was able to balance work, school, and household responsibilities with newfound ease. It was a relief to see them thriving, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. But my peace was shattered one afternoon when I was blindsided by a court summons delivered to my door. Vanessa was suing for custody of the children. My mind raced in disbelief. After everything she had put us through, how could she have the nerve to try and take them away from me? How could she think she had any right to disrupt the lives we had rebuilt without her? The absurdity of it all consumed me. I knew that in many cases, courts favored the mother, and that filled me with dread. Even though I had been the one raising Lucas and Clara for years, the thought of Vanessa's manipulative charm swaying the court terrified me. The day of the hearing arrived, and despite my lawyer's preparations, nothing could have fully prepared me for seeing Vanessa again. She walked into the courtroom looking completely different, dressed modestly with no makeup and a somber expression. To me, it was clear it was all an act. But as she took the stand and began her testimony, I could see the judge and jury reacting to her performance with sympathy. With tears streaming down her face, Vanessa began, claiming that she had made mistakes but only wanted to make things right. She said she had left to secure a better future for her children, and now, after all her hard work, she wanted to be a part of their lives again. Each word she spoke, dripping with feigned remorse, made my blood boil. It was all a lie. My lawyer leaned in and reminded me to stay calm, telling me my time to speak would come. When it did, I stood up and took a deep breath. Your Honor, I'm not here to attack the mother of my children, but the truth must be told. Vanessa didn't leave us to work or to improve our lives. She simply abandoned us. I spoke about how I had woken up one night to find the letters she left behind. How she claimed I was holding her back from her dreams, and how, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. I talked about the countless nights I spent comforting our children, who couldn't understand why their mother had abandoned them. I shared the struggles of raising 2 children alone, balancing work, school, and all the responsibilities that came with being a single father. But despite the weight of it all, I managed to give them a stable and loving home. As I spoke, I saw Lucas and Clara sitting in the audience, their eyes brimming with tears. It hit me hard, but I couldn't stop. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Then, to my surprise, Lucas stood up. His voice cracked as he spoke. Please, don't take us away from our dad. He's all we have. Clara, too, began crying and ran to my side, wrapping her arms around me. I don't want to go with her, she sobbed. She left us. The judge looked at Vanessa, his expression unreadable. Please, explain your actions, he said, turning toward her. Vanessa tried to hold herself together, but her voice trembled. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes, she said, but everything I did was for them. I had to work abroad to secure a better future for them. Yes, it was hard, but I was making sacrifices to come back and give them a better life. Her words sounded rehearsed, but it was then that my lawyer stepped in, presenting the court with evidence. With your permission, Your Honor, I would like to present evidence that contradicts the mother's testimony. He handed over a series of photos and posts from Vanessa's social media accounts. In them, she was seen attending lavish parties, lounging on exotic beaches, and dining at expensive restaurants with various men. There was no sign of hard work or sacrifice for her children. Instead, the pictures painted a picture of someone living a carefree life, financed by others, while I was left to shoulder the responsibility of raising 2 young children alone. The impact was immediate. The judge's expression changed, and the jury murmured among themselves. Vanessa tried to defend herself, but her words fell flat. Her lies had been exposed, and the truth was finally out. I was trying to build connections to secure something better for them, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with a mixture of guilt and defiance. But her words fell flat, failing to convince anyone in the room. The judge, unimpressed and clearly unfazed by her act, turned to her with a cold, measured gaze. You abandoned your children for years, leaving the most crucial and challenging phase of their upbringing entirely in the hands of their father, the judge said sternly, his voice heavy with disapproval. You lived a life of luxury, financed by others, while they struggled without you. And now, after all this time, you want to take them from a stable and loving home. Vanessa lowered her head, her shoulders sagging as she was unable to respond to the judge's harsh but truthful words. The weight of her actions hung in the air like a suffocating cloud. The judge then turned to me, his expression softer but no less resolute. Sir, he began, your testimony, along with the evidence presented, clearly demonstrates who has been there for these children. Considering everything that has been said, and the preferences expressed by the minors themselves, I grant full custody to the father. Furthermore, given the circumstances of the mother's abandonment and the emotional toll it has taken, visitation rights are hereby denied. A wave of indescribable relief flooded through me as I heard the judge's ruling. It felt like the weight I had carried for so long was finally lifted. As I turned to Lucas and Clara, they ran to me, their arms wide, and I embraced them tightly, tears streaming down all of our faces. Justice had been served. Vanessa left the courtroom without a single glance in our direction, her head held low, defeated. For me, that moment marked the end of a long, painful chapter. Though I knew challenges would still lie ahead, I also knew that I now had something Vanessa would never fully understand. The unwavering, unconditional love of my children. That it was what truly mattered, and that was what I would always protect. After the verdict, I brought Lucas and Clara home. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary. The weight of years of heartache and struggle had seemingly lifted. The kids seemed relieved, even happy. But as I observed them, I noticed something in their eyes that unsettled me. A quiet sadness, something unspoken but undeniably present. Lucas, usually so mature and composed for his age, was quieter than usual. Clara, despite her smile, seemed distant, almost as though a part of her was still adrift. Over the next few days, I returned to our routine, focusing on making them feel safe and loved. But that look in their eyes, the unspoken worry, kept gnawing at me. I realized with a heavy heart that while I had fought so fiercely to protect them from the pain Vanessa had caused, there was something I had neglected to consider. Their connection or lack thereof to their mother. One night, as I was tucking Clara into bed, she asked a question that shattered the quiet peace of the moment. Daddy, why didn't Mommy want to stay with us? I swallowed hard, the weight of the question pressing down on me. I had known this moment would come eventually, but I wasn't prepared for it. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Sweetheart, I began carefully. It's not that she didn't want to stay with you. Sometimes, people make choices that hurt others, even when they don't mean to. Clara looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes, full of curiosity, but lacking the words to express all the questions she held inside. I think I miss her, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Those words broke my heart. Clara had been so young when Vanessa left that she could barely remember her. Yet, there was a void, a yearning she couldn't quite understand. A gap I could never fill no matter how hard I tried. After Clara fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room, lost in thought. I replayed her words over and over in my mind, wondering if I was truly doing enough for them, if I had unknowingly deprived them of something important. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, Lucas walked past me and sat down on the couch, looking like he had something he wanted to say but was uncertain whether to voice it. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke. Dad, do you think Mom misses us? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't just a simple inquiry. It was a glimpse into the doubts and feelings that had been quietly building up inside him. I realized then that, despite his maturity, Lucas had been carrying his own set of unresolved emotions. I took a deep breath, trying to offer him the reassurance he needed. I think she does, son, I said, my voice steady. Sometimes people find it hard to show how they feel. Lucas nodded, but his expression remained uncertain. He didn't seem entirely convinced, and I couldn't blame him. I realized then that I had been so focused on protecting them from the pain of Vanessa's abandonment that I had ignored their need for closure, for understanding. That night, as I lay in bed, a thought took root in my mind. No matter how deeply Vanessa had hurt us, no matter how much she had abandoned them, she was still their mother. And no matter how hard I fought to protect them, I couldn't erase the fact that they deserved to have a relationship with her, no matter how flawed she might be. No child should grow up without at least a few memories of their mother, no matter the circumstances. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my lawyer, who immediately expressed concern when I told him what I was considering. "You don't have to do this," he said. "The court ruled in your favor." "I know," I replied, my voice firm. "But this isn't about legal obligations. This is about doing what's right for the kids." I took a deep breath and called Vanessa. She answered the phone hesitantly, clearly suspicious of why I was reaching out. When I explained my decision, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke, her voice faint with disbelief. "You're really going to do this?" "I'm not doing this for you, Vanessa," I said firmly. "I'm doing it for our kids. They deserve to know you, even if it's just a small part of their lives." After a long pause, Vanessa reluctantly agreed, and we arranged for her to see the kids once a week, always in a public place, to ensure that everything remained safe and within boundaries. The following Sunday, I took Lucas and Clara to the park where we had agreed to meet. Vanessa was already there, sitting on a bench, her body tense with nervous anticipation. When the kids saw her, they hesitated, unsure of what to do. Lucas, ever the protector, held my hand tightly as if seeking my permission. I nodded, and together, they slowly walked toward her. Vanessa tried to smile, but the smile quickly faltered, and her eyes filled with tears as she knelt down to hug them. "I'm sorry," she repeated over and over, her voice choked with emotion. Lucas hesitated, holding back, but Clara couldn't resist. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, tears welling in her eyes. I stood back, watching them from a distance, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. There was still resentment, still a lingering anger toward Vanessa for what she had done. But at that moment, I knew that what I was doing was the right thing. It wasn't about forgiving Vanessa or forgetting the past. It was about ensuring my children had the chance to form their own understanding of their mother. On the drive home, Lucas broke the silence. "Thanks, Dad," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and saw a small, genuine smile tug at his lips. Clara, though tired, seemed more at ease, a weight lifted from her heart. I knew, in that moment, that I had done the right thing. From then on, the visits became part of our routine. I always kept my guard up, ensuring that Vanessa didn't use these opportunities to hurt them further. But in the end, it wasn't about her. It was about Lucas and Clara. I still carried the scars of what Vanessa had done, and perhaps I always would. But seeing my children smile, seeing them build memories of their mother, despite everything, reassured me that I was on the right path. No child deserves to grow up without memories of their mother, no matter how flawed she may be. And above all, my kids knew one thing. They could always count on me. Because, in the end, my love for them was the one thing that would never fail.